Growing up in a family where everyone had their path clearly laid out, I felt like an outsider. My siblings were always the focus. Academically gifted, socially polished, and destined for greatness. I was the youngest, the quiet one who didn't seem to fit in. No one believed in me. My parents had high expectations for everyone else, but for me, there was nothing but silence, a quiet, unspoken assumption that I would never amount to anything. I remember the day I first brought up the idea of starting my own business. I was young, ambitious, and determined, but the reactions from my family were not what I expected. My father chuckled dismissively. "That's a nice little dream, but you should be focusing on something more practical," he said. My mother, usually more sympathetic, just shook her head. "Don't get your hopes up. It's a tough world out there, and not everyone gets to be successful," she warned. They didn't understand. They couldn't. They had their vision of what success looked like, and I didn't fit into it. But I wasn't deterred. I could feel something inside me burning. An urge to prove them all wrong. I didn't know how, but I knew I wasn't going to be the failure they expected. I would show them. I started small, so small that no one noticed. I worked at night, kept my plans to myself, and slowly built my business from the ground up. It was hard, isolating at times, but every day I pushed forward, determined to prove that I was capable of achieving something they could never imagine. The first breakthrough came when I signed my first contract. It wasn't much, but it was a sign. It was validation that I was on the right track. Still, I kept my success to myself. The last thing I wanted was for them to think they had been right all along about me. I needed more. I needed to be undeniable. Over time, the business grew, slowly at first but steadily. Every new client, every new contract was a step forward, and I kept my head down, focused on the work. But as the business expanded, something unexpected happened. My family, the very ones who had never believed in me, started to take an interest. They hadn't cared when I was struggling, but now that they saw success on the horizon, they wanted in. It was subtle at first. A casual conversation with my father, a suggestion from my brother about how I should run things better. I didn't pay much attention to it, but then they started to push harder. My father, once dismissive, now wanted to know the details of my business. He wanted to help. My brother, always the one with a silver tongue, began asking if he could invest in the business. I could feel their desire for control, their hunger to take credit for something I had built. They had never believed in me when I needed them most, and now they saw an opportunity to profit from my success. The worst part? I wasn't surprised. I knew this was coming. In their minds, I was still the same person I had always been, the underachiever, the dreamer who would never make it. But I had changed. I wasn't the person they thought I was. They didn't see it yet, but I was no longer the weak link in the family. I was the one who had built something real, something they couldn't just take. And then came the turning point. My brother approached me one evening, looking confident, a typical smirk on his face. "You know," he said with a glint in his eye, "I've been thinking, maybe we should partner up. Take the business to the next level. I could help, I have the connections." That was it. The moment I had been waiting for. And yet I wasn't prepared for the anger that surged inside me. He didn't care about me. He didn't care about my success. He just saw an opportunity to control something I had worked my ass off to build. That moment crystallized everything. I realized that the only way forward was to prove that I had done it on my own. But I had to be smart. I had to let them think they could control me, that they could manipulate me into giving them what they wanted. And so I played along. I told my brother I'd think about his offer. I knew that by keeping my cards close, I would have the upper hand when the time came. But I also knew one thing. I had to build my business to a level that no one could touch. Months went by and I kept working in secret, expanding my business in ways my family couldn't see. I made strategic investments, secured key partnerships, and made sure everything was in place before I made my next move. But the deeper I went, the more I realized just how much my family wanted to take control. Every conversation with my father, every casual comment from my brother about helping, felt more like an attempt to undermine me. It wasn't just about money, it was about power. They wanted a stake in what I had built, but they didn't understand what it took to get there. They didn't see the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the mistakes I had made. They only saw the potential for themselves. They saw me as the key to their own success, as the ticket to their wealth. But I wasn't going to give them that. I had worked too hard for it. I had earned it. It was time to make my move. I began to craft a plan. A strategy that would not only protect my business but would also shock my family. I needed to show them who I had become. Someone they couldn't control. Someone who was no longer at their mercy. I didn't want to hurt them, but I needed them to understand that they had underestimated me for the last time. The day finally arrived. My father, my brother, and my uncles were all gathered together for a family meeting. They had no idea what was coming. I had built this empire in silence, letting them believe they had the power. But now I was ready to reveal the truth. I was no longer the person they had known. I wasn't the failure. I was the success they had never seen coming. I stood up, calm and collected, but my heart raced. I could see the anticipation in their eyes, the hunger for answers, the desire to know what I had been doing all these years. I paused for a moment, savoring the moment of power before I dropped the bombshell. I've built a $50 million business, I said, my voice steady but filled with conviction. And I did it all on my own. No help from anyone. No handouts. I did it myself. The silence that followed was suffocating. My father's face went pale. My brother's expression shifted from confidence to shock. They couldn't believe it. They were stunned, speechless, as the reality of my success set in. And in that moment I knew I had won. This wasn't just about the money, it was about proving to them that I wasn't the failure they thought I was. I was more than they could ever imagine. But I wasn't finished yet. There was more I needed to say. You all doubted me. You thought I was nothing. You thought I would fail. But now here I am standing tall. And I didn't need any of you to make it happen. It was a sweet victory, but it wasn't over. I wasn't going to let them off the hook that easily. They had taken me for granted, and now they had to face the consequences of their actions. I had built something they couldn't take away, and I wasn't about to let them control it. I left the room that day knowing that things would never be the same. My family had no choice but to accept that I had built something of value, something they couldn't touch. And as I walked away, I felt a sense of triumph, a feeling I had never known before. The underdog had won. The days following the revelation of my $50 million business were filled with an undercurrent of tension. My father, ever the stoic figure, had been forced to acknowledge my success, but it was clear that there was a war waging behind his composed demeanor. He no longer looked at me with the same dismissive gaze that once told me I would amount to nothing. Instead, there was a deep unease, a silent respect that he couldn't hide. But that didn't mean he'd fully accepted it. He still believed in his own way, in the old ways of doing things, the ways that had never included me as anything more than an afterthought. My brother was a different story. His reaction was colder, more calculating. He tried to mask his anger with forced smiles, but I could see through it. The carefully constructed facade began to crack. This was someone who, for so long, had considered himself the chosen one in the family, the one who would inherit everything. The idea that I had succeeded, without his help, without any backing from him, struck him like a slap in the face. He wasn't just upset because I had achieved something monumental. No, he was furious because he felt betrayed. For years, he had believed that he was the one with the power, the one who would eventually lead the family business. Now that I had proven him wrong, he couldn't handle it. He started to press even harder, offering partnership deals, bringing up joint ventures, trying to make me believe that working together would be the best way to grow. But it was all a game, a strategy to control what I had built. He didn't care about the business. He cared about taking what was mine. What he didn't understand was that I was smarter than he realized. I had always been underestimated, but now I was the one holding all the cards. I remember the day he called me into his office. It was a well-placed move. My brother had always been good at staging these kinds of conversations. He wanted to look like the good guy. But I wasn't buying it anymore. "We need to talk," he said, his voice laced with fake sincerity. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time for us to combine forces. Bring the two businesses together. I can help you scale it." I could feel the familiar heat rising in my chest. The audacity, the arrogance. He truly believed that I needed him, that without his connections, my success would mean nothing. But I wasn't going to give in. Not this time. I sat across from him, a calm exterior masking the storm inside. "I appreciate your offer," I said slowly, choosing my words with precision. But I didn't need your help before, and I certainly don't need it now. He wasn't used to being rejected, especially not by me. The shock on his face was almost satisfying, but I couldn't let it show. I had to remain composed. You're making a mistake, he said, trying to regain control of the situation. You think you can do all this alone? You're going to burn out, you'll hit a ceiling. I leaned forward, looking him straight in the eyes. No, I won't. I've already surpassed your ceiling. And I didn't need you to do it. I let the silence linger between us for a moment before standing up. The only mistake here is thinking you could control me. And with that, I walked out of his office, leaving him to stew in his own defeat. But I knew this wasn't over yet. The battle for control had only just begun. I was determined to see it through to the end on my terms. In the weeks that followed, my brother tried more than once to sway me, even involving my father. It wasn't just about a business deal anymore. It was about power, about control over something I had built with my own blood, sweat, and tears. They didn't just want a piece of my business, they wanted to diminish me, to make me feel like I wasn't capable of handling it on my own. They had always seen me as the weak link, and now that I had proven them wrong, they couldn't accept it. But I had a plan. I wasn't going to give them any more chances to take what was mine. I had spent years making the business successful, carefully crafting every move, every decision. I wasn't about to let them undo everything I had worked for. So, I began to expand even further, quietly, strategically. I sought out new investors who had nothing to do with my family. I diversified, strengthened my position, and solidified my company's place in the market. It was around this time that I realized something. The revenge I had been seeking, the satisfaction of proving my family wrong, wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't just about showing them I could succeed. It wasn't about winning. It was about freedom, the freedom to do things my way, to live my life on my terms, without anyone telling me what I could or couldn't do. And that was the moment the power truly shifted. I wasn't just a successful entrepreneur anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. And then the final test came. It was a meeting with my father that sealed everything. My brother had gone behind my back, attempting to sway him, to pit him against me. I walked into my father's office, knowing this would be the moment that everything either fell apart or fell into place. He looked at me, his eyes filled with uncertainty. I've been thinking, he said slowly. Maybe it's time we reconsidered things. Maybe you do need help. I never thought you could get this far on your own. But I've been proven wrong. His words weren't as important as his tone. It wasn't just about him admitting I had done it alone. It was about him finally understanding that I didn't need him, that I had never needed him. I had created something bigger than what he had ever envisioned. Something that was all mine. Something that didn't require his approval or his assistance. I've already built everything I need, I told him, my voice calm but firm. This is my success, not yours. And I don't need your help now, just like I didn't need it before. For the first time in my life, I saw a flicker of respect in my father's eyes. It wasn't the approval I had once longed for, but it was something much deeper. He knew in that moment that I had earned it. And that was all that mattered. There was no more room for doubt. I had won. In the end, the sweetest revenge wasn't about watching them fail. It wasn't about seeing them regret their actions. It was about the realization that I had done something that no one, not even my own family, could take from me. The business was mine. The success was mine. And most importantly, the respect I had fought for, the respect I had earned, was finally mine. I walked out of that office, knowing that my journey had come full circle. The dream I had once fought for in silence, in secrecy, was no longer a dream. It was a reality. And as I reflected on everything that had happened, the struggles, the betrayals, the victories, I realized that the greatest lesson of all was this. Never let anyone define your worth. Never let anyone tell you what you can or cannot do. Because when you prove to yourself that you are capable of greatness, nothing can ever stand in your way. The greatest victory of all wasn't in the money, the empire, or the success. It was in knowing that I had built something from nothing, and no one could ever take it away from me. And that was the ultimate form of revenge.